Have you ever thought about what it really means to grow old with dignity and independence? To face the challenges of aging head-on without losing yourself in the process? Well, in today's video, we're diving deep into the inspiring story of Grandfather Park, a remarkable 70-year-old who found a unique solution to living comfortably in his twilight years, defying all conventional expectations of elderly care. Stick around, because what we're about to share might just change the way you think about aging forever. As we explore Grandfather Park's journey, you'll uncover the real struggles that so many seniors face, from the emotional turmoil of relying on family to the practical challenges of everyday life that can feel overwhelming. You'll see how Grandfather Park found an unexpected solution, building a genuine connection with a young couple, and how these relationships flourish to offer something beyond just companionship. It's a story of human connection, resilience, and how the most unexpected bonds can often make all the difference. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Oh, and before we get into it, if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future stories of wisdom and resilience. Your support helps us continue to bring you heartfelt content just like this one. Alright, let's get into it. Part 1 begins. At the age of 70, Grandfather Park found himself in a reflective mood, looking back on the various living arrangements he had tried throughout his life. He'd lived with his children, employed a caregiver, and even spent time in a nursing home. But no matter what he tried, each experience left him feeling empty, unfulfilled, and yearning for something more in his golden years. After a lot of soul-searching, and what seemed like a stroke of luck, he found a living arrangement that resonated deeply with him, something that finally offered him the comfort and autonomy he had been seeking all these years. "I turned 70 this year," he recalls, his eyes filled with both nostalgia and determination. "It was around my 75th birthday that I started facing serious health issues, problems that eventually took me away from this world, or at least it felt like that for a while. Back when my beloved spouse was still here, I always felt secure. We promised each other that no matter what happened, we'd always be there for one another, through thick and thin. We even found ways to make hospital visits bearable, sharing laughs and memories that lightened even the darkest days. But after his spouse passed, everything changed dramatically. The once simple and even amusing hospital visits now became a source of dread. Without his partner by his side, each trip to the doctor felt like a weight too heavy to bear. His health continued to decline, and dragging his frail body to the hospital became a nightmare, each visit depleting his energy until he could only collapse into bed afterward, feeling like a mere shadow of his former self. He had children, a son and a daughter who loved him deeply. But they were caught up in the whirlwind of their own lives, juggling work, family, and responsibilities. Grandfather Park never wanted to be a burden on them, and he refrained from asking for their help during his hospital visits, which ironically led to the exact situation he had tried so hard to avoid. Despite his best intentions, his children ended up having to care for him more than he ever wanted them to. Then, one day during a routine trip to the market, fate dealt him another blow. He stumbled, fell, and ended up in the hospital yet again. This time, the doctor told him he would need at least 6 months to recover. In the aftermath of his injury, his children came up with a plan. He would alternate between their homes, spending 3 months at his son's place and 3 months at his daughter's. It seemed like a reasonable solution, but despite their love and best efforts, Grandfather Park couldn't shake the feeling that he was intruding in their lives. "There's a saying," he shares, his voice tinged with sadness, "a parent's home is always the children's home, but the children's home can never be the parent's home." And no matter how much his children tried to make him feel welcome, he felt the truth of those words. It was a heavy feeling, a longing for his own space, a place where he truly belonged. Living in his children's homes left Grandfather Park feeling more isolated than ever. The loneliness was palpable. He found himself eating alone in his room while his children gathered together, chatting and laughing in the living room. Their world seemed distant, a place where he no longer truly belonged. Even small suggestions, like asking him to prepare his own meals, felt less like empowerment and more like a subtle way of distancing him from their lives. He felt like a relic of the past, a reminder of something they had outgrown, struggling to keep up with the changes in the world around him. After 6 long months of trying to fit into their lives, Grandfather Park decided it was time to return home, to his own space. Though his home was small and his injuries still caused him pain, it was his sanctuary, filled with memories and moments that belonged only to him. He knew that living alone came with its own set of challenges, but he was determined to reclaim his independence. One of the biggest challenges of living alone was grocery shopping. Each trip to the market felt like a monumental task, and by the time he made it back home, his legs ached, and he was drenched in cold sweat, a painful reminder of his limitations. In the end, he had to hire a caregiver, despite the financial strain it put on him. The monthly salary of 500,000 won was a significant burden, far exceeding his pension. He found himself relying on his children for financial support, which added to his feelings of guilt and helplessness. Even with a caregiver, things didn't go as smoothly as he had hoped. Families who could afford to hire caregivers provided inviting environments, filled with nourishing meals and comfortable living conditions. But Grandfather Park's limited budget meant he could only provide the basics, and caregivers often left after just a few days, unable to adapt to what they saw as meager conditions. They described the food he provided as like rabbit feed, too sparse to sustain the energy needed for their demanding work. Even the agencies that supplied caregivers were hesitant to send anyone his way, knowing the conditions wouldn't lead to long-term satisfaction. Faced with the reality that he couldn't keep a caregiver, Grandfather Park began to consider other options. He thought about moving into a nursing home, even though the idea felt like yet another loss. It was a painful thought, to have to ask his children for help to make this transition, knowing it would be one more burden on them. But without consistent help at home, it seemed like the only option left. The nursing home he ended up in was a far cry from what he had hoped for. It was inexpensive, yes, but poorly equipped, lacking in the comforts that might have made life a bit more bearable. Still, it was affordable with his pension, and it took some of the financial pressure off his children, which brought him some comfort. He tried to settle in, deciding to spend the rest of his life there, knowing how hard things were for his children and wanting to do his part to lighten their load. But the rigid, almost military-style living of the nursing home proved to be suffocating for Grandfather Park. He had always been a free spirit, and despite his best efforts, he struggled to adapt. After just a month, he made the decision to leave and return to his own home, a place that, despite its challenges, offered him the freedom he so deeply valued. Just as he was settling back into his own routine, a stroke of luck arrived. An online grocery shopping service started operating in his area. It was a small miracle. With the help of his daughter, Grandfather Park began ordering groceries online, which he could pick up at a small mart located conveniently at the entrance of his apartment complex. It was a huge relief. No more long, painful walks to the market, just a short trip downstairs, and his groceries were there. The young couple running the mart quickly noticed Grandfather Park's struggles. They began helping him carry his groceries up to the elevator, and over time, what started as a small act of kindness grew into a genuine friendship. Their warmth and compassion brought joy to his days, and he cherished their company. For the first time in a long while, Grandfather Park felt a sense of connection, a reminder that even in his twilight years, there were still opportunities for joy and companionship. This comfortable routine continued for 6 months, and while Grandfather Park was content, he knew that many uncertainties still loomed ahead. He was growing older, and each passing day brought new reminders of his declining physical strength. It was then that he overheard the young couple arguing, a moment that would change everything. To be continued in Part 2. Grandfather Park stood quietly near the entrance of the mart, overhearing the young couple's argument. It was a heated discussion about their financial situation, an argument that tugged at Grandfather Park's heart. The wife passionately defended her decision to spend a little extra on something special for their child, while the husband, ever practical, worried about their budget and the mounting costs of running the mart. Their words, filled with love, worry, and desperation, struck a chord deep within him. The wife argued that it was important to fulfill their child's little wishes, like buying a piece of the exotic fruit she had wanted for so long. The husband, however, was cautious, pointing out the realities of their financial limits. He knew that their tight budget barely covered their expenses, let alone luxuries. Standing there, Grandfather Park felt a strong connection to their struggle. It was the same struggle he faced every day, balancing between what was needed to survive and what was needed to make life meaningful. In that moment, an idea struck him. A brilliant, simple idea that could potentially solve both his needs and the young couple's struggles. As if a light had switched on, he felt a wave of hope rush through him, washing away some of the loneliness that had weighed him down for so long. That very day, after the couple had finished their work, Grandfather Park approached them with a proposal. He offered to pay them a monthly sum of 200,000 won if they could assist him with a few essential tasks. He only needed simple things, some help with laundry, tidying up his small living space, and preparing 2 uncomplicated meals each day. Nothing fancy, just the basics to help him get by. Initially, the young couple seemed hesitant. Their faces showed a mix of surprise and embarrassment. They felt awkward accepting money from someone they had grown close to, someone they now considered a friend. They insisted that they were happy to help him without compensation, that they had done so all along without expecting anything in return. But Grandfather Park knew better. He knew that this arrangement could truly benefit them both, and he insisted gently, emphasizing that he genuinely wanted to help them in return for the kindness they had shown him. After some gentle nudging and assurances, they finally agreed. What started as a simple proposal to solve each other's problems soon grew into a beautiful arrangement, one that neither Grandfather Park nor the couple could have foreseen. For Grandfather Park, it was an opportunity to maintain his independence without placing a burden on his children, and for the couple, it provided a steady income that helped ease their financial strain. The young couple carved out time from their busy schedule at the mart to visit Grandfather Park's home each day. They took care of the laundry, tidied up his living space, and prepared 2 simple meals, always with a smile on their faces. Their presence brought warmth and energy into his home, transforming what had once been a lonely, silent space into a place of laughter and companionship. Over the next few months, Grandfather Park found himself feeling more content and fulfilled than he had in years. The young couple became like family to him, their daily visits brightening his days in ways he hadn't thought possible. It wasn't just the help they provided, it was the companionship, the little moments of connection, and the genuine care they showed that made all the difference. He was particularly touched by their dedication and attention to detail. The husband would always make sure his clothes were folded just the way he liked them, while the wife would prepare meals that were simple but filled with flavor and warmth. They took pride in their work, and their efforts showed. It wasn't long before Grandfather Park started feeling healthier and more energetic. His spirits were lifted, and with the young couple by his side, he began to enjoy life again. Even the smallest moments felt special. Grandfather Park knew how lucky he was. He had found a solution that allowed him to live with dignity, to maintain his independence without relying too heavily on his children. It wasn't just about the physical help they provided, it was the emotional bond that had formed between them. He felt truly seen and valued, something that had been missing from his life for a long time. As time went on, the bond between Grandfather Park and the young couple only grew stronger. They became an integral part of his life, and he began to think of them as his own grandchildren. They would share stories over meals. Grandfather Park would recount tales from his youth, filled with adventure and mischief, and the couple would share their own struggles and dreams for the future. These moments of connection were priceless, filling the empty spaces in Grandfather Park's heart with warmth and belonging. One day, as they sat together over a simple lunch, Grandfather Park made them a promise. He told them that if they continued to care for him with the same dedication they had shown so far, he would reward them with a bonus of 5 million won. The young couple was stunned. Their eyes widened with disbelief, and tears filled their eyes as they realized the significance of his words. They were overwhelmed with gratitude, knowing that this money could change their lives. It could provide them with the financial stability they had been desperately seeking. The young wife spoke first, her voice filled with emotion. She told Grandfather Park that his generosity meant more to them than he could ever know. It wasn't just the money, It was the kindness behind it, the recognition of their efforts, and the genuine bond they had built. She promised him that they would continue to care for him, not just for the reward, but because they truly cared for him as a person. Her words touched Grandfather Park deeply, and in that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace and gratitude. Thanks to this beautiful arrangement, Grandfather Park felt a renewed sense of stability in his old age. The clouds of uncertainty that had once loomed over him seemed to part, allowing rays of sunlight to filter through. He knew that he was no longer alone. He had people who cared for him, who valued him, and who were willing to stand by his side through the challenges of aging. The couple's dedication to Grandfather Park became a source of inspiration for others in their community. Neighbors began to take notice of the bond that had formed between them, and many were touched by the genuine care and affection they shared. It was a reminder that, even in a world that often feels disconnected, there are still moments of human connection that can make all the difference. Grandfather Park often reflected on how far he had come since those dark days after his wife passed. He had gone from feeling isolated and burdened to experiencing true companionship and support. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was a life that brought him joy, and for that, he was deeply grateful. He realized that aging didn't have to mean giving up on happiness or independence. With the right support and the willingness to think outside the box, it was possible to live a fulfilling life, even in the twilight years. He was especially grateful that he could provide the young couple with the stability they needed while also ensuring his own comfort. It was a win-win situation, and it gave him a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. He no longer felt like a burden on his children. Instead, he felt like he was contributing to something meaningful, building a relationship that enriched all their lives. As he sat in his cozy living room, watching the young couple prepare dinner, Grandfather Park couldn't help but smile. His heart was full, and for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. He knew that the road ahead might still be challenging, but he was no longer afraid. He had found his own way to live well, to age with dignity, and to find joy in the everyday moments that made life worth living. To be continued in Part 3. Life continued in a steady rhythm for Grandfather Park, the young couple, and the little community they had built together. The days were filled with small routines, the comforting sound of conversations over meals, and the gentle laughter that echoed through Grandfather Park's home. Though he still faced the inevitable challenges of aging, he no longer felt alone in his struggles. Instead, he felt uplifted by the sense of companionship that had blossomed between him and the young couple. The connection had become a beacon of light, guiding him through his twilight years with grace. One bright morning, as they shared breakfast together, the young husband looked at Grandfather Park and suggested something that sparked a new sense of excitement. "Why don't we take a walk around the neighborhood park today?" he asked, his eyes full of enthusiasm. The young wife nodded in agreement, her smile encouraging. Grandfather Park hesitated for a moment. He had always been cautious about his physical limitations, but their excitement was contagious, and he couldn't help but agree. Later that afternoon, they made their way to the park. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle, and the air filled with the smell of blooming flowers. The young couple walked on either side of Grandfather Park, their arms outstretched to offer support if he needed it. It was the first time in years that Grandfather Park had ventured out for a walk like this, and he found himself savoring every moment, the feeling of the sun on his skin, the sight of children playing, and the simple joy of being outdoors. As they walked, the young husband pointed out the different flowers along the path. "Look, Grandfather, these are marigolds, my favorite. They remind me of my hometown," he said, his voice filled with nostalgia. Grandfather Park smiled, feeling a pang of warmth as the young man shared this piece of his past. The young wife added her own stories, describing the park visits she used to take as a child, her voice animated as she reminisced. It was during that walk that Grandfather Park realized how much these young people had become a part of his life, their presence as comforting as the familiar walls of his home. They found a bench near a pond, and the young couple helped Grandfather Park settle down comfortably. They sat together, watching ducks glide across the water and children running along the pathways. It was a small, seemingly insignificant moment, yet it was one that filled Grandfather Park's heart with contentment. The young couple spoke about their dreams, how they hoped to save enough to provide their child with a brighter future, how they wished for stability, and how much they cherished the bond they shared with Grandfather Park. Listening to them speak, Grandfather Park couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. He was grateful to be a part of their journey, even if only in a small way. It was in moments like these that he found meaning in the challenges he had faced. Life had taken so much from him, his beloved spouse, his health, and at times, even his hope, but it had also given him so much in return. This young couple, this unexpected friendship, was proof of that. As they headed back home, Grandfather Park felt a renewed sense of energy. He realized that, despite his age, there were still moments of beauty to be found, still experiences that made life worthwhile. And most importantly, there were still people who cared, people who made each day a little brighter. This walk, as simple as it had been, reminded him of the importance of cherishing every moment, no matter how small. The weeks that followed were filled with more of these moments, walks to the park, shared meals, and even a few small outings to the local market. The young couple continued to help Grandfather Park with the household chores, but more than that, they made him feel like he was part of their family. They involved him in their plans, asked for his advice, and shared their worries with him. It was the kind of connection he had longed for during those lonely years after his spouse had passed, and now, he finally had it. One day, as they sat down to dinner, the young wife hesitated before speaking. "Grandfather," she began, her voice soft, "we've been thinking about something, and we wanted to talk to you about it." She glanced at her husband, who nodded in encouragement. Grandfather Park raised an eyebrow, curious. The young husband took a deep breath and continued, "We've been considering expanding our little mart. We think it's time to grow, maybe add a few more products, something that could attract more customers and help us improve our finances." Grandfather Park listened attentively as they explained their plans. They wanted to make the mart more than just a small grocery store. They wanted it to be a place where the community could gather, where people could find not only essentials but also a sense of connection. It was an ambitious plan, and Grandfather Park could see the passion in their eyes as they spoke. He nodded, a smile slowly spreading across his face. "I think it's a wonderful idea," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "You both have the heart and the vision, and I know you can make it happen." The couple beamed, their faces lighting up with hope. They had been nervous about sharing their idea with Grandfather Park, worried that he might think it was too risky or unrealistic. But his words gave them the encouragement they needed, and they knew they could count on his support. Over the next few days, they started planning, drawing up ideas, researching products, and even reaching out to suppliers. Grandfather Park watched with pride as they worked tirelessly, their dedication a testament to their determination to create something meaningful for themselves and for the community. Seeing their enthusiasm reminded Grandfather Park of his own youth, of the time when he and his spouse had started their family, filled with dreams of a better future. It was a time of hard work and sacrifice, but it was also a time of hope. And now, seeing the young couple take on their own dreams, Grandfather Park felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wanted to be there for them, to support them in whatever way he could. One evening, as they gathered for dinner, Grandfather Park made an announcement of his own. He told the young couple that he wanted to contribute to their plan, that he wanted to invest in their dream. The young wife's eyes filled with tears, and the young husband looked at Grandfather Park with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. They had never expected him to offer something like this, and they were overwhelmed by his generosity. "You've done so much for me," Grandfather Park said, his voice steady. "You've given me companionship, care, and a sense of purpose. The least I can do is help you achieve your dreams." The young couple protested at first, insisting that they couldn't accept such an offer. But Grandfather Park was adamant. He wanted to be a part of their journey, just as they had become a part of his. Eventually, they relented, accepting his offer with deep gratitude. It wasn't a huge sum of money, but it was enough to give them a boost, enough to help them take the first steps toward expanding their mart. And for Grandfather Park, it was more than just an investment in a business, it was an investment in the people who had brought so much light into his life. As they worked together to bring their vision to life, Grandfather Park felt a sense of fulfillment that he hadn't felt in years. He knew that he was making a difference, that he was helping to build something that would benefit not only the young couple but also the entire community. It was a reminder that, no matter how old he was, he still had something to give, something to contribute. The days that followed were busy, filled with excitement and anticipation. The young couple worked hard to transform their little mart, adding new products, setting up shelves, and even painting the walls to give the place a fresh new look. Grandfather Park watched with pride as they brought their dream to life, their passion and determination inspiring everyone around them. As we end this part of Grandfather Park's journey, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue to bring you stories of resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. And don't forget to drop a comment below. Let us know what touched you the most about Grandfather Park's story so far. We love hearing from you. To be continued in Part 4. The mart was beginning to look different. Fresh coats of paint adorned the walls, and new shelves stood proudly, filled with products that the young couple had meticulously selected. The small space was transforming, and with each change, a new energy seemed to flow through the place, an energy that radiated not just from the young couple but also from Grandfather Park, who had poured his heart into helping bring their dream to life. For him, this wasn't just a business project, it was a chance to create something meaningful with people he deeply cared about. As the mart continued to evolve, so did Grandfather Park's role in it. Though he couldn't contribute physically to the heavy lifting, he found other ways to be involved. He began sitting at the entrance of the store, greeting customers with a warm smile and engaging them in conversation. His presence became a welcoming beacon, drawing in curious passers-by who couldn't resist the charm of the elderly man sitting with a twinkle in his eye and a story to tell. It wasn't long before people started coming back, not just for groceries but to chat with Grandfather Park. One day, a young boy entered the store with his mother, his eyes widening at the sight of the old man sitting by the door. "Grandpa, do you have a story for me today?" the boy asked eagerly. Grandfather Park chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Of course, young man," he replied, motioning for the boy to come closer. He began to weave a tale about his own childhood, filled with mischievous adventures, laughter, and a touch of wisdom. The boy listened with rapt attention, his mother smiling softly nearby. It was moments like these that made Grandfather Park feel alive, like he was contributing something valuable to the community. It wasn't just the children who enjoyed Grandfather Park's stories, adults, too, would stop by, drawn by his warmth and genuine interest in their lives. He became a fixture of the mart, a symbol of the community spirit that the young couple was trying to cultivate. He remembered each customer by name, remembered their stories, their joys, and their struggles. He offered words of encouragement to those who needed it, celebrated small victories with those who shared their good news, and listened quietly to those who needed an empathetic ear. His role might have seemed small to some, but to Grandfather Park, it was everything. In the evenings, after the store had closed, Grandfather Park and the young couple would sit together, discussing the events of the day. They would count the sales, talk about the customers who had visited, and share their hopes for the future. The young couple often sought Grandfather Park's advice on how to improve the business, and he was more than happy to share his thoughts. It became a routine, a cherished part of their day that strengthened their bond and gave Grandfather Park a sense of belonging that he had missed for so long. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the mart, the young wife turned to Grandfather Park with a thoughtful expression. "Grandfather," she began, her voice gentle, "we were thinking, perhaps you'd like to have a more official role here at the mart. Something that's just yours." Grandfather Park raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean, my dear?" he asked. The young husband jumped in, his face lighting up. "We were thinking we could set up a small corner of the mart just for you, a place where you could share your stories, maybe even sell a few things that you make." "Like a little nook of wisdom," he said with a grin. Grandfather Park was taken aback. He had never imagined that his presence could be something worth highlighting in such a way. "You want me to have my own little corner?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of surprise and emotion. The young wife nodded, her smile warm. "Yes, Grandfather. We think people come here not just for the products, but because they feel connected to you. You make them feel welcome, and we want to celebrate that. We could even call it Grandfather Park's Corner. Grandfather Park felt his heart swell with emotion. He had spent so many years feeling like he was in the way, like he was a burden on those around him. And now, here were these young people, telling him that he was an integral part of their dream, that he mattered. He took a deep breath, blinking back tears, and nodded. I would be honored, he said, his voice cracking slightly. The young couple beamed, their excitement palpable. They began making plans that very night, plans to create a space where Grandfather Park could share his stories, display small handmade crafts, and be an even more central part of the community. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The young couple set up a cozy corner in the mart, complete with a comfortable chair, a small table, and a few shelves where Grandfather Park could display items. They even added a sign above the corner that read, Grandfather Park's Corner, Stories and Wisdom. It was a simple setup, but it was perfect. The first day it was ready, Grandfather Park took his seat, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. He wasn't sure if people would be interested, but he was willing to give it his best. To his surprise, customers flocked to the corner. They loved the idea of having a place to sit and listen to Grandfather Park's stories, to take a break from their busy lives and immerse themselves in the warmth of his words. Grandfather Park began making small wooden carvings in his spare time, simple figurines of animals, each one unique. He displayed them on the shelves, and to his delight, they sold quickly. People loved the idea of taking home a piece of his craftsmanship, something made with love and care. The young couple couldn't have been happier. The mart had become more than just a place to buy groceries, it had become a community hub, a place where people could come to feel connected, to share stories, and to experience the warmth of human connection. Grandfather Park's Corner was at the heart of it all, and he couldn't have been prouder. He had found a way to contribute, to be part of something meaningful, and it filled him with a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in years. One day, a young woman entered the mart, her face weary. She approached Grandfather Park's Corner, her eyes scanning the shelves filled with small wooden carvings. I heard about you from my friend, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. She said you tell stories, stories that help people feel better. Grandfather Park smiled gently, motioning for her to sit down. Well, my dear, he said, I do have a story or two. Why don't you sit, and I'll tell you one of my favorites. The young woman sat down, and Grandfather Park began to speak. He told her a story from his own youth, a story about facing hardships and finding the strength to keep going. He spoke of love, loss, and the beauty of resilience. As he spoke, the young woman's eyes began to well with tears, and by the end of the story, she was smiling, a soft, grateful smile that spoke volumes. Thank you, she whispered. I needed that. It was moments like these that made everything worthwhile for Grandfather Park. He knew that his life had value, that he could still make a difference in the lives of others, even in his later years. The young couple often marveled at the way people gravitated towards him, the way his stories seemed to touch hearts and bring comfort. They had given him a place in their mart, but in return, he had given them something far more valuable, a sense of community, of purpose, and of hope. As we conclude this part of Grandfather Park's journey, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying Grandfather Park's story. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us keep bringing you these heartfelt stories of resilience, hope, and the beauty of human connection. And don't forget to drop a comment below, let us know what touched you the most about Grandfather Park's journey so far. We love hearing from you. To be continued in Part 5. As Grandfather Park settled into his new role at the mart, life seemed to take on a beautiful new rhythm. Each day was filled with purpose, each moment bringing something new and unexpected. His corner of the mart had become a small sanctuary, a place where people came to hear stories, to laugh, to find comfort, and to share a moment of stillness amidst the busyness of their everyday lives. It was the kind of connection that Grandfather Park had craved for so long, and now, it was finally his. One chilly autumn morning, Grandfather Park arrived at the mart, a warm scarf wrapped around his neck. The young couple greeted him with smiles, their faces glowing with excitement. "Grandfather," the young husband said, "we have a surprise for you today." Grandfather Park raised an eyebrow, curious. The young wife took his hand and led him to his corner, where he saw something that took his breath away. There, on the shelves, were beautifully framed photographs, pictures of Grandfather Park with customers, moments captured during his storytelling sessions, and candid shots of him sharing laughter with the community. "We wanted to show you just how much you mean to all of us," the young wife said softly. Grandfather Park stood in silence, his eyes misting over as he looked at the photographs. Each one was a reminder of the connections he had built, of the lives he had touched. It was overwhelming, in the best possible way. He had spent so much of his life feeling like he was fading into the background, and now, here was proof that he mattered. He turned to the young couple, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "I never imagined. This means more to me than words can say." The young husband patted Grandfather Park on the shoulder. "You deserve it, Grandfather. You've brought so much warmth and joy to this place, and we're all better for it." The three of them stood there for a moment, taking it all in, the photographs, the warmth, and the feeling of belonging. It was a simple gesture, but it was one that filled Grandfather Park's heart with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As the day went on, customers began arriving at the mart, each one noticing the new addition to Grandfather Park's corner. Many of them smiled as they saw the photographs, stopping to point out their favorite memories. One elderly woman, who had been a regular visitor to the mart, approached Grandfather Park with tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "Your stories have brought me so much comfort. I lost my husband last year, and there were days when I felt like I couldn't go on. But coming here, listening to you, it gave me hope." Grandfather Park reached out, taking her hands in his. "My dear," he said gently, "you're not alone. We all have our struggles, but together, we can find the strength to keep going." The elderly woman nodded, her eyes glistening with gratitude. It was moments like these that reminded Grandfather Park of just how powerful human connection could be. He had always known that stories had the power to heal, but seeing it firsthand, experiencing it with others, made it all the more meaningful. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the young wife approached Grandfather Park with an idea. "Grandfather, what if we organized a special evening, a storytelling night here at the mart? We could invite everyone from the neighborhood, make some tea, and you could share your stories with all of us. I think it would be wonderful." Grandfather Park's eyes lit up at the thought. He had always enjoyed sharing his stories, but the idea of doing it in a more organized way, of creating an event that could bring the whole community together, was something he hadn't considered before. "I think that's a fantastic idea," he said, his voice filled with excitement. The young husband nodded in agreement. "We could decorate the mart, set up some chairs, and make it a really special evening. I think people would love it." The three of them began planning right then and there, their minds buzzing with ideas. They decided to hold the event the following week, giving them enough time to spread the word and prepare everything they needed. In the days leading up to the event, the mart was a flurry of activity. The young couple worked tirelessly to prepare, decorating the space with twinkling lights and arranging chairs in a cozy circle. They made flyers and handed them out to customers, inviting everyone to come and join them for an evening of stories and community. Grandfather Park watched in awe as the young couple poured their hearts into making the event special, their enthusiasm infectious. Finally, the night of the storytelling event arrived. The mart was transformed, the lights cast a warm glow, and the shelves were adorned with small decorations that gave the space a festive feel. The young couple had prepared tea and snacks, setting them out on a table near Grandfather Park's corner. Slowly, people began to arrive, families, friends, neighbors, all coming together to share in the experience. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation, a sense of excitement that made Grandfather Park's heart swell. As everyone settled into their seats, the young husband stood up to welcome them. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "We wanted to do something special for our community, and we thought, what better way than to gather together and listen to the stories of someone who has brought so much warmth and wisdom into our lives. So, without further ado, I'm honored to introduce Grandfather Park." The room erupted in applause, and Grandfather Park felt a lump form in his throat as he stood up. He looked around at the faces before him, some familiar, some new, all filled with expectation. He took a deep breath and began. He started with a story from his youth, one filled with adventure and mischief, a story that brought laughter and smiles to the room. He spoke of his journey through life, the ups and downs, the moments of joy and the moments of heartache. He shared the lessons he had learned, the wisdom he had gained, and the love he had experienced. As the night went on, the atmosphere grew even more intimate. People laughed, they cried, they nodded in understanding as Grandfather Park spoke. It was as if, in that small mart, time had stopped, and they were all connected by the simple act of sharing stories. The young couple watched from the side, their eyes shining with pride. They knew that this was what they had always wanted, to create a space where people could come together, where they could feel connected and understood. When Grandfather Park finished his last story, the room was silent for a moment, and then it erupted in applause once again. People stood, clapping, some even wiping away tears. Grandfather Park smiled, his heart full. He had always believed in the power of stories, but tonight had shown him just how much of an impact they could have. He bowed slightly, his voice steady as he spoke. "Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. It means more to me than words can say. We may all come from different walks of life, but tonight, we were one family, sharing in the beauty of our experiences." After the applause died down, people began to approach Grandfather Park, thanking him for his stories, for his wisdom, for his warmth. The young wife handed out cups of tea, and the young husband served snacks as people mingled, talking and laughing. It was a beautiful sight, a community coming together, united by the simple power of storytelling. As the evening drew to a close, the young couple sat down next to Grandfather Park, their faces filled with contentment. "That was amazing, Grandfather," the young husband said, his voice filled with admiration. "You have a gift, a way of bringing people together, of making them feel seen and heard." The young wife nodded in agreement. "We're so grateful to have you in our lives, and we're so glad that we could share tonight with everyone." Grandfather Park smiled, his eyes glistening. "I'm the one who's grateful," he said softly. "You both have given me so much, a purpose, a place where I belong. Tonight was more than I could have ever hoped for." The three of them sat there for a moment, taking in the beauty of the night, the warmth of the community, and the love that surrounded them. As we wrap up this part of Grandfather Park's story, I want to thank you all for being a part of this journey. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue to bring you stories of hope, resilience, and the beauty of human connection. And don't forget to drop a comment below, let us know which part of Grandfather Park's story touched you the most. We love hearing from you. To be continued in Part 6. As the weeks went by, the success of the storytelling night continued to ripple through the community. People began to stop by the mart not just for groceries, but to relive the magic of that special evening. They wanted to hear more from Grandfather Park, and they wanted to be part of something that had brought so much warmth and connection to their lives. The young couple couldn't have been happier, their vision for the mart was coming to life, and Grandfather Park was at the very heart of it all. One day, as Grandfather Park sat in his corner, carving a new wooden figurine, he was approached by a familiar face, a middle-aged man who had attended the storytelling night with his teenage daughter. The man smiled warmly at Grandfather Park before speaking. "Grandfather, I've been meaning to thank you," he said. "That night, it changed something for us. My daughter and I, well, we hadn't really connected in a long time. But after hearing your stories, we went home and talked, really talked, for the first time in years. I just wanted you to know how much that meant to us." Grandfather Park looked up, his heart swelling with emotion. He set the figurine aside and met the man's gaze. "I'm so glad to hear that," he said, his voice warm. "Connection is what makes life beautiful, and sometimes, all it takes is a story to bring people together." The man nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Grandfather. You've made a bigger difference than you could ever know." After the man left, Grandfather Park sat back in his chair, reflecting on the impact his stories had made. He never imagined that the tales of his own life, the ups and downs, the struggles and triumphs, could have such a profound effect on others. It filled him with a sense of purpose, a feeling that his life still had so much to offer, even in these later years. He had spent so much time worrying about being a burden, about fading into the background, and now, he was more alive and more needed than he had ever been. The young couple noticed this change in Grandfather Park as well. He seemed more energetic, more at peace, and even his health seemed to improve. He walked with a spring in his step, and his laughter filled the mart with joy. It was clear that having a sense of purpose, or role in the community, had given him new life. The young couple decided to build on this momentum and came up with a new idea. They wanted to host a series of workshops, where Grandfather Park could teach others the art of woodworking. When they presented the idea to Grandfather Park, his eyes lit up with excitement. "You really think people would want to learn from me?" he asked, his voice tinged with both hope and disbelief. The young wife nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, Grandfather. People love your carvings, and I think they'd love to learn how to make something with their own hands. It would be another way to bring the community together, just like your storytelling night." Grandfather Park agreed, and they began planning the workshops. They decided to keep the classes small, just a handful of people at a time, so that Grandfather Park could give each participant his full attention. The young husband gathered supplies, wood, carving tools, and protective gloves, and soon enough, they were ready to begin. The response from the community was overwhelming. People of all ages signed up for the workshops, eager to learn from Grandfather Park and to be a part of the growing community at the mart. The first workshop took place on a crisp Saturday morning. The participants gathered around a table set up near Grandfather Park's corner, their faces filled with anticipation. Grandfather Park stood at the front, a piece of wood in his hand, and began to speak. "Woodworking is about patience," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It's about taking your time, finding the shape that's already hidden in the wood, and bringing it to life. It's not just about making something beautiful, it's about learning to see the beauty that's already there." The participants listened intently as Grandfather Park demonstrated the basics of carving. He moved slowly, his hands steady, showing them how to hold the tools, how to make gentle, deliberate cuts. He encouraged them to take their time, to feel the wood beneath their fingers, and to enjoy the process. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost meditative, as everyone focused on their work, the sound of carving tools softly filling the air. As the workshop progressed, Grandfather Park moved from person to person, offering guidance and encouragement. He shared stories as he worked, stories about his own experiences with woodworking, about the times he had carved toys for his children, and about how the simple act of creating something with his hands had always brought him a sense of peace. The participants listened, their hands busy as they carved, their hearts touched by his words. By the end of the workshop, each participant had created a small wooden figurine, a bird, a flower, or a simple geometric shape. They held their creations in their hands, their faces beaming with pride. The young wife took a photo of the group, capturing the joy of the moment. "Thank you, Grandfather," one of the participants said, her voice filled with emotion. "This was such a wonderful experience. I never thought I could make something like this, but you made it possible." Grandfather Park smiled, his heart full. "The beauty of woodworking," he said, "is that it teaches us patience, resilience, and the joy of creation. I'm so proud of all of you for giving it a try." The participants applauded, and Grandfather Park bowed slightly, feeling a sense of fulfillment that words could hardly describe. He had not only shared his craft but had also helped others discover the joy of creating something with their own hands. The workshops became a regular event at the mart, each one bringing new faces, new stories, and new connections. People from all walks of life came together to learn, to create, and to share in the experience. Grandfather Park's corner had become more than just a place for storytelling. It was a place for learning, for growing, and for building a community. The young couple watched with pride as their vision continued to evolve, their mart becoming a true hub of connection and creativity. One day, after a particularly successful workshop, the young husband approached Grandfather Park with a thoughtful expression. "Grandfather," he said, "we've been talking, and we think it's time to give the mart a new name. Something that reflects what it has become, thanks to you." The young wife nodded, her eyes filled with excitement. "We were thinking of calling it Grandfather's Mart, because you're the heart and soul of this place. You've made it what it is today." Grandfather Park was speechless. He looked at the young couple, his eyes brimming with tears. "You want to name the mart after me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The young husband nodded, smiling. "Yes, Grandfather. This place wouldn't be what it is without you. You've brought the community together, you've shared your wisdom, and you've given us all a reason to come here, not just for groceries, but for connection, for warmth, and for love." Grandfather Park wiped his eyes, his heart overflowing with emotion. "I don't know what to say," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm honored, truly honored. This place has given me so much, a sense of purpose, a family, and a home. I can't thank you enough." The young wife reached out, taking his hand. "You deserve it, Grandfather. You've given all of us so much more than we could ever repay." The decision was made, and the mart was officially renamed Grandfather's Mart. A new sign was hung above the entrance, and when the community saw it, they were filled with joy. It was a fitting tribute to the man who had become the heart of their neighborhood, a man whose kindness, wisdom, and warmth had touched so many lives. Grandfather Park stood beneath the new sign, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. He had never imagined that his life could take such a beautiful turn, that he could find a place where he truly belonged, and where he could make a difference. As the sun set on that special day, Grandfather Park sat in his corner, watching the people of the community come and go. He saw children running in to buy snacks, adults stopping by to chat, and friends gathering to share a cup of tea. It was everything he had ever hoped for, a place filled with love, laughter, and connection. He knew that his journey was far from over, and that there were still many more stories to tell, many more lessons to share, and many more moments to cherish. And so, as we come to the end of Grandfather Park's story, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us on this journey. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue to bring you stories of hope, resilience, and the beauty of human connection. And don't forget to drop a comment below, let us know which part of Grandfather Park's journey touched you the most. We love hearing from you, and we're so grateful to have you as part of our community. Thank you, and until next time, take care, stay connected, and never stop sharing your stories.